Ready, sir.
Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavatpadam Shankaram Lokashankaram Asmad Gurubhyo Namaha. In the last class, we had seen that there are various views regarding the nature of soul, that the Charvaka, the atheists, then the Buddhists, then the Jaina, then Sankhya, Yoga, Mimamsa, and finally the Vedanta view have been discussed, and we had seen that the Vedanta or the Upanishad try to propound the nature of self as pure, absolute, without any duality, secondless Brahman only. So that's what we had seen in the last sentence, that avidyaya kartrutvadi bhak paramarthataha nirdharmakaha paramananda bodhayeva iti Upanishadaha. This is the very nature of soul, that is Atma or Jiva, the soul, is avidyaya kartrutvadi bhak. That means it is a doer, it is an agent. The soul is an agent, but it is only due to avidya or ignorance. That means just because of its unawareness, just because of its conditioned state, the self considers itself as the doer, as an agent. But the Sankhya, Yoga and other systems think that the soul is the doer, and therefore whatever it performs, it accrues to it only. That means the self receives the fruits of all his deeds. But here the Upanishads make us know that the soul is not a doer, and whatever agenthood is attributed to the soul, it is only due to ignorance. Ignorance in the sense, ignorance about true nature of the self, ignorance about the all-pervading consciousness only. That means the adjuncts, the conditions, if these are removed, then the soul remains as absolute consciousness. Thus, kartrutvadi, kartrutva, bhoktrutva, alpajnatva, all these are conditions only, and these are projected on the self due to ignorance. And if ignorance is removed, then its effects like these, kartrutva, bhoktrutva, etc. will also be removed. That's why they say paramarthataha nirdharmakaha. That means the soul is paramarthataha nirdharmakaha. That means without any type of property, attribute or characteristic in the absolute sense. This is very important for the reason that Brahma and Jiva, that means the absolute consciousness, the final supreme consciousness and the individual consciousness, there is a lot of difference at the empirical level only. That means in the general sense of the words, we understand that the Supreme Soul is supreme cause of creation, sustenance and destruction, dissolution of the universe. And because all these characteristics are not found in the soul, they think that the individual soul is different from the Supreme Soul. But the Upanishads try to make us know that these conditions are also just attributed, and original consciousness is attributeless, and that is the soul, and in other sense the same is called the Brahma. That's why Shankara Bhagavatpada says in the Sutra Bhashya, Atma cha Brahma, and this is actually the summum bonum of the entire Vedanta philosophy. Evam, now he connects, the author connects with the present one. Samanyataha aham pratyaya siddhe chidatmani vada vipratipattibhihi sandigdhe aham pratyasya alambana vishesha nirnayaya aha bhagavan acharyaha. Now this is a connecting sentence. Whatever he has explained earlier, now he is connecting that with the present shloka, the first shloka of Dashashloki. He says, Samanyataha aham pratyaya siddhe chidatmani. Chidatma, that means the Atma which is of the form of Chit, that is the self which is absolute consciousness, and it is Samanyataha aham pratyaya siddha. That means in general it is established as the meaning of the awareness I. But vadi vipratipatti sandigdhe, then people get doubts, people are confused regarding its true nature because of divergent views of the opponents, of other thinkers also. Thus, because so many views are prevalent regarding the nature of self, there is of course a doubt, and to ascertain the true nature of that self only, Adi Shankaracharya or Shankara Bhagavatpada begins his text Dashashloki with the first shloka. Aham pratyasya alambana vishesha nirnayaya. The purpose here why Shankara Bhagavatpada had started his Dashashloki with this is aham pratyasya alambana vishesha nirnayaya, to ascertain the particular base of this I consciousness. That means when I get this feeling, I am so and so, etc., the base of this I consciousness should be ascertained, should be properly, thoroughly understood, and for that purpose only Shankaracharya has begun his text Dashashloki. And after this introduction, now we are getting into the original text Dashashloki. The first shloka is this: Na bhumir na toyam na tejo na vayur na kham nendriyam va na tesham samuhaha anaikantikatvat sushuptyeka siddhas tadeko vasishta shivah kevaloham. Tadeko vasishta shivah kevaloham. Na bhumir na toyam na tejo na vayur na kham nendriyam va na tesham samuhaha anaikantikatvat sushuptyeka siddhas tadeko vasishta shivah kevaloham. Shivah kevaloham. This is the first shloka. Through this shloka, Shankara Bhagavatpada intends to convey to us this: the I feeling, the I consciousness present in all the beings, it is Shivaha and it is Kevalaha. Shivaha, Kevalaha, Aham. And this Aham does not refer to any particular individual. It doesn't mean that Shankara Bhagavatpada alone is Shiva and Kevala. It means that the Aham Pratyaya, that means the I feeling or consciousness present in all the beings, is Shivaha. Shivaha means auspicious. And Kevalaha. Kevalaha is very important because Kevala means absolute, secondless, the only thing. And it actually denies the presence of the second, the presence of all the duality in the form of this manifest world. And we had seen earlier also that the appearance, that means whatever is appearing before our eyes, whatever vastness we perceive through our senses, it is dual, it is second. And in the absolute Brahman, this second world or the appearance is not there. And all this is only a modification. Because of this, it is negated in the absolute Brahman. And when all the conditions are removed, there remains only the pure self. And that pure self or pure consciousness is called the Brahman, because it is all pervading. And sitting here in this room also, or at this particular place also, if you look at a distance and see somebody somewhere, some 10 kilometers or so, there is also Aham Pratyaya in that body. Similarly, if you look far, 10,000 kilometers also, if somebody is there, there will be Aham Pratyaya, the I feeling, I consciousness. And ultimately, this I consciousness is all pervading, and for that reason only it is called the Brahman. And that Brahman is Kevalaha. Kevalaha, that means conditionless. Why this? Because we observe that in this particular wakeful state, I perceive myself as Akevala or Visishta, because I am conditioned. I am conditioned in the sense that I find myself as male, female, Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, scholar or ignorant person, or various other also. I am confined, I am limited to a particular place, or I am conditioned by time also because I belong to a particular time. So in this way, I look at myself that I belong to the place, I belong to the time, I belong to a particular caste, creed and gender, all this. These are all conditions. And in wakeful state, of course, these conditions accrue to the person because the person finds himself so. But in the sleep state, we find that some of these conditions get removed, but the soul still is under conditions. And when he enters into the deep sleep state, that is Sushupti, he finds no condition at all. And that particular state is Sushupti, where the soul is in the pure form. There is no condition at all, external conditions at all. But Vedanta system tells us that still there is some condition in the form of ignorance, and it is in the form of samskara or impression, the impression of ignorance that is there with the soul. And that's why, because of that particular impression only, when that person wakes up from his sleep, gets into the wakeful state, he can reconnect and recollect all the previous things. And this also gets removed in the final Brahma state. And that's why in that particular Brahman state, there is no condition like male, female, or beast or human being, or scholarly person or ignorant person. So all these conditions are absent in that particular state, and that is our true form, says the Vedanta. And here Shankaracharya refers to that Shivaha Kevalaha Aham. And this me, this I, the feeling present in all the beings is Shiva, auspicious, and Kevala, that is attributeless, pure and absolute. Now, we find in the previous three sentences that na bhumihi, everywhere it is negated. Na bhumihi, not earth. Na toyam, not water. Na tejaha, not fire. Na vayuhu, not air. Na kham, not even the sky, space. Na indriyam, not even the sense. Na tesham samuha, not even the group of these senses. Anaikantikatvat. The reason is because all these are inconsistent. Anaikantika, that means vyabhicharita. They are inconsistent. And sushuptyeka siddhaha. And regarding the self, Shankaracharya says, Sushupti eka siddhaha. The self is purely, perfectly established in the state of deep sleep, where there are no conditions at all, no differences at all. There is only absoluteness. And Sushupti, deep sleep, eka, absolutely, siddha, established. That means the true nature of the self is well perceived in the deep sleep state. Tat ekaha avasishtaha. And in that state I find myself as pure. That's what he says in the Dakshinamurti Stotra also. Vishwam darpana drushyamana nagari tulyam nijantar gatam pashyan atmani mayaya yadha nidraya. So he says in the sleep he finds himself differently. In the wakeful state he finds himself differently. Pashyan atmani mayaya bahirivod bhutam yadha nidraya. Yes sakshat kurute prabodha samaye swatmanam evadvayam tasmai Shri Gurumurtaye namaidam dakshinamurtaye. This is the perfect Vedanta sense, that in the dream state I may find myself differently, a different place with different persons. I may experience various things, but when I get into the wakeful state I find myself the same. And in the other way, the same Sushupti example can be applied to the present situation also, that in the wakeful state there are all differences, the empirical differences. In the dream state only projected because of the ignorance. There are all differences. There are all, of course, glee, gloom, sorrow, happiness, all these feelings. But when one transgresses this state also, there is absolute peace, happiness, and there is only consciousness. And Shankaracharya refers to that state and says, this is actually our own state, our own form, and all the other are conditioned, all the other are only transient, and they are all because of various conditions. That's why he says, Tat ekaha avasishtaha. In the deep sleep state, I remain as pure self. Ekaha, the single self. Avasishtaha, I remain one. That means there are no other feelings. And even as the author stated earlier, the pramata, pramiti, pramana, all these variations, that means the perceiver, the perceived, and the process of perception. See, all these variations are not found in the state of deep sleep. And Shankaracharya refers to that and says, Tat ekaha avasishtaha shivaha kevalaha aham. And this is exactly the experience one gets through deep meditation. When one sits for deep meditation and gets into oneself, then he realizes that all the other are only the conditions. And as he tries to find himself amidst all these different things, he finds that the body is not the self, the mind is not the self, the intellect is not the self, the brain is not the self, and all these are only the paraphernalia or the apparatus for the conditioned self. And the self is not perceivable, not tangible outside, but still he is the perceiver. That's why the Upanishad also says, Na drashtaram drushev pashyeh. That means it's actually he is behind the act of perception. That means because of that particular consciousness only, the eyes perceive, the ear hear. So this way all these are activated because of that particular self, and that aham is Brahman, and it is pure, auspicious and single. That's what he wants to tell us, instruct us through this shloka. And in the previous two sentences, Shankara Bhagavad told us that na bhumir na toyam na tejo na vayuhu na kham, the five pancha mahabhuta, these mahabhuta, that means the gross elements, and we observe these only as the world: the earth, the air, the water, the fire, the sky. So all these are the pancha mahabhuta. These are considered as gross elements. These are formed out of the subtle elements called Shabda, Rupa, Rasa, Gandha and Sparsha. So these are the subtle elements, and out of these elements the five gross elements are formed. This is the Vedanta concept. And Shankara Bhagavad says, denying the view of the Charvaka, we observe that the Charvaka consider the self as a group of the elements, Bhumi and Vayu, Apaha, Tejaha, the four elements, and they don't believe in the presence of one Akasha. That's why we had seen that only Chatvari Bhutani Sammilitani Atma Ityeke. So when all the four elements come together, the result is one consciousness. Thus, the Charvaka consider the consciousness or I feeling as result of the mixture of all these only. Now Shankara Bhagavad points to that and says, Na bhumihi. You cannot say that the self in the body, the self, the perceiver, is not the earth. He is not a modification of the earth, one. Na tejaha, not even of the fire. Na vayuhu, not even of the air. So these are all external, these are all elements, and these are tangible. And the self is intangible, and for this reason he is not a result of a modification of all these elements. And second, he says, Na kham, not even the sky. That means if anybody accepts Pancha Mahabhuta, including the sky also, the self is not even voidness, that is the Akasha. Nendriyam, not even the sense. Na indriyanam tesham samuha, not even the admixture of all these senses. Because in all these we find that anaikantikatvat, because there is the defect called inconsistency in all this. That means if you consider Bhumi, Vayu, Teja and Apaha and Kham, Indriyam, all these, there is the problem that inconsistency is there. They are not consistent. That's what the author is going to explain in the coming passages. Thus, the first shloka tells us very clearly that the point of meditation should be that kind of self which is pure and secondless and the only absolute consciousness. Asya arthaha. Now Madhusudana Saraswati explains Asya arthaha aham. So the word in the shloka, the word aham, which occurs in the shloka, means aham pratyaya alambanam. Aham should not be translated just as I, but it is the base of the feeling I. So what is the base of this feeling? That means out of which the feeling comes out. In the Kenopanishad we find Kene shitam patati preshitam manaha Kena pranah prathamah praiti yuktaha. The Upanishad mentions very clearly, it questions what is the base of this, all this feeling, by which the mind is activated, by which the speech is activated, by which my eyes and ears are activated. That means what is the force behind the function of all these organs? It questions, and in the form of a reply it proceeds and tells that Brahman is a cause of everything. That's why na tatra chakshur gacchati na vag gacchati no manaha na vidmaha na vijanimaha yadhaitad anushishyat. It says that it is the force, the Brahman, the consciousness is the force behind the function of all the sense organs, and because of that only outside the sun, moon, everything shines, and inside the Indriya also shine forth, and thus it is the Brahman which is to be realized, which is to be meditated upon, it says. Here also the word aham should be understood in the sense of aham pratyaya alambanam. Pratyaya means here jnana, anubhava. So aham pratyaya alambanam means the substratum, the source, the base of the feeling I. Ekaha. What is this eka? It is a number. Eka means one. And here it should not be translated as one, but advitiyaha. That means without a second. So there is difference between these two, that if you count something as one, there is every chance of having a second also. But here it is ekaha means advitiyaha, not having a second. That means it is the only reality pervading throughout the universe, and it is advitiya, not having any other second. Avasishtaha. Avasishta means the remnant, the remaining part. That is sarvadvaita badhepi abadhitaha. Avasishta, Madhusudana Saraswati explains that it should be understood in the sense sarvadvaita badhepi abadhitaha. That means even when the entire dual experience is contradicted, negated, that is discarded, still that which is never discarded is advitiya, avasishta. And take for example the wakeful state and the deep sleep state. In these two states there is of course the consciousness. Wakeful state, I perceive through my eyes, I understand the dual world and I respond. And here there is experience which is activated by the consciousness only. But in the deep sleep state, all this dual world is negated, but still there is this aham pratyaya continuing. Because if that particular consciousness is not accepted in deep sleep state, then there would not be chance of coming out of the state and reconnecting with the world. That's why in wakeful state there is the experience of dual world, but in the deep sleep state that dual world experience is negated and it is badhita. That's what we understand from this example. So wakeful state, it is abadhita, but it is badhita or negated in the deep sleep state. But consciousness which is present, which is passing through all the three states, it is not contradicted, it is not negated. Therefore that is avasishta. That means when everything is cancelled, when everything disappears, in deep sleep or deep meditation also, the only thing remaining is consciousness. That is avasishta. Sarvadvaita badhepi abadhitaha. How this dvaita is badhita? It's very important issue in the field of Vedanta, whether dvaita is badhita or Brahma is badhita. So the Advaita naturally supports the view that the Brahman is abadhita and dvaita is abadhita. What is badhita? Contradicted. Contradicted in the sense which is present in a particular period of time and which is not present in the other time. Here we find that the dual world which is appearing to our senses, this world is present in a particular period of time, and it is not present in other period. Everything in the world is passing through various stages, and past, present, future, in the three divisions of time, this dual world is not found. Everything is changing, but one thing is certain, that consciousness, the Brahman, it is present every time, and because of this only world is Badhita and not the Brahman. That is Shivaha, and that Aham Pratyaya Alambana, that means the base of the feeling I is Shivaha. This is auspicious. Auspicious for the reason that it has no other purpose, it has no other expectation, it has no other condition, and because of that always it is auspicious only, and it is actually vibrating throughout the universe. This Aham, the I feeling. Paramananda Bodha Rupaha, and because knowledge or realization it is its true nature, it is Paramananda Bodha Rupaha. It is not only just existence, it is Parama Ananda, it is absolute bliss, and it is Bodha or knowledge also. That's what the Upanishad says, Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam Brahma. Because of that only the Upanishad says the consciousness is Satyam, existence in the pure form, Jnanam, it is knowledge in the pure form, and it is Ananda in the pure form. Pure form in the sense unconditioned or without any adjunct or not caused by external factors. And this is actually the meaning of this shloka. And now Tasyaiva Mangala Rupatvat. Now Madhusudana Saraswati proceeds. Tasyaiva, that means the Advitiya Atma. Tasyaiva Mangala Rupatvat. That's what Shankara Bhagavad also said, that it is Shivaha Kevaloham. So here he says Tasyaiva Mangala Rupatvat. Just because that self is auspicious, Kevalaha Nirdharmakaraha. Kevalaha, that means absolute, secondless. Nirdharmakaha, attributeless, conditionless. Tena, and for that reason, Advitiyaha Sarva Pramana Abadhyaha Paramananda Bodhayeva Aham Pratyaya Alambanam. So, that kind of pure, absolute self, Advitiyaha, secondless, Sarva Pramana Abadhyaha, that means not negated or cancelled by any valid means of knowledge. That means there may be any proofs, but direct perception, inference, or comparison, or verbal testimony, take any pramana, but this, the presence of this consciousness cannot be cancelled or negated, discarded by any of these. Paramananda Bodhayeva, and it is basically the pure bliss. Tadeva Aham Pratyaya Alambanam, and that consciousness is the base of the feeling called I. Iti Upanishadaha Pakshaha Eva Shreyan. So when you have, this is actually the way of dispelling all doubts, that when you have various kinds of views before you regarding the nature of self, that the Charvaka or the atheists, the materialists, they say that the self is only a product of matter, it is also material. And when Bauddha say that it is kshanika, it is momentary, it is transient, and Shunya also, when they say it is nothing is called as Atma, there is no such thing, etc. When Jaina say that Sharira Parinama Parimitaha, that means the self or the jiva is of the size of the body it occupies, etc. So these views are not authentic. And similarly, Sankhya and Yoga, these, in both these systems, the self is considered as Karta, somewhere it is Bhokta, and in the Nyaya Shastra also it is Karta, and in the Mimamsa Shastra it is Bodha Swarupa, but Karta. So there are divergent views regarding this nature of the self. And now with one word, Shankara Bhagavad clears all these and says these are not to be followed. These are not to be considered as authentic because there are several logical problems, and all these views go against the scriptures. And in our tradition, we believe that the scripture is the ultimate authority. Why? Because scriptures are revealed to the sages in deep meditation, and it is personal experience of that particular sage. And naturally, because of this only, there cannot be any chance of the scriptures having all defects, the human defects, all that. And when the human being, that means any scholar, the human being thinks something, and just out of his intellect, if he postulates a particular theory, there is every chance of that theory having some defects. And now, because of that only, scripture is given utmost importance in our tradition, Vedanta tradition. And now scriptures say that the self is pure without any second, and it is attributeless. And now all the other views of Charvaka, Bauddha, Jaina, Sankhya, Yoga, Prabhakara Mimamsa, Bhatta Mimamsa, so all these views go against the scripture, and because of that, Aupanishadaha Pakshaha Shreyan. So on comparison, we can come to the conclusion that the view propounded in the Upanishads alone is the best. That means it is perfect, it is devoid of all the human defects, and therefore one should adhere to the Upanishads only, keeping aside all the other views, and thus the doubt is removed now. Ityarthaha etat upapadanaya. And now, to ascertain that the view of the Upanishads alone is the best and more practical, etat upapadanaya, to establish that only, itara vadi matani nirakarishan. Now Shankara Bhagavad desires to reject the views of all the other thinkers. Prathamam dehatmavadam nirakaroti. So in the same order, in the order that Madhusudana Saraswati had put them on record, that first Charvaka, then Bauddha, Jaina, in the same order, now we find here Prathamam dehatmavadam nirakaroti. Now the first two sentences of this shloka, Dashashloki shloka, the two sentences refute the view that the body itself is soul. This is Dehatmavada. That means the view of the Charvaka or the materialists. That means according to whom the self is only a product of matter. This view is not acceptable to the Advaita philosophy because it is based on the scriptures, and the Upanishads, the Vedic scriptures, do not authenticate this view, and thus Shankara Bhagavad refutes that, saying na bhumir na tejam na toyam na vayihi. That means the first four elements are not to be taken as the self. Atra ahamiti sarvatra pratyekam naya sambadhyate. Now the author of Siddhantabindu explains that atra, in this particular shloka, aham iti, the word aham should be sambadhyate, should be connected. Sarvatra, in all the two sentences, pratyekam, with each word, naya sambadhyate, together with the negative particle na. Then what will be the sentence? The sentence should be construed in this way: ya bhumihi saha aham na bhavami. That means na bhumir, the first one, na bhumihi na toyam. So we find here four separate sentences: na bhumihi, na toyam, na tejaha, na vayuhu, na kham, na indriyam, na va tesham samuhaha. So these sentences should be separately construed with the help of the word aham. So when you connect this aham with the first one, then it will be ya bhumihi saha aham na. That will be the way of reading behind sentences. So here we find that ya bhumihi, that means whatever you understand as the earth, saha aham na bhavami. That earth is not the meaning of the word aham, and the self is not the earth. Thus there is difference between these two. One. Similarly, yaha apaha taha aham na bhavami. Similarly, whatever is understood as water, it is not the meaning of the word self. Self is different from the earth, the water, the air, the fire, the sky, etc. Iticha, in this form, paraspara tadatmya abhavaha drashtavyaha. Paraspara tadatmya. Paraspara tadatmya means mutual identity between these two. Mutual identity between the earth and the self, the water and the self, the air and the self, and the fire and the self. This way there is mutual identity, but it makes it very clear here that paraspara tadatmya abhavaha drashtavyaha. One should understand from these sentences that there cannot be identity between the self and the elements. Both are of different category. Yadyapi, now there is a problem here. Yadyapi vadina pratyekam bhumyadehe atmatvam nabhyupayate sanghataseva tad abhyupagamat tathapi. So of course the vadi, that means the opponent, pratyekam bhumyadehe atmatvam nabhyupayate, that means the atheist or the opponent, he does not accept or propound each of these elements as Atma. He doesn't say that. Nowhere we come across the view that earth is the self or air is the self. This way the Charvaka also do not propound. Tadhapi, still, why do not they propose such kind of thing? Because sanghatasaiva tad abhyupagamat. As we had seen earlier, the materialists or the atheists, they say that the conglomeration or the combination of all these elements only is the meaning of the word self. That means self, according to them, is combination of all these elements only, 4 elements. And that's why sanghata, that means the combination or admixture, is accepted by them. And if we understand that the first 2 sentences of this shloka, they refute the view of Charvaka, but Shankara Bhagavad-pada here takes each one separately. Na bhumihi, na toyam, na tejaha, na vayuhu. So each one is taken separately, and separately it is discarded. So there is an anomaly between these two. That the traditional Charvaka Vada means the combination of elements is not the self. And Shankara Bhagavad-pada here refutes the view that each of the element is not the Atman. So how can we say that the view of atheists only is contradicted by Shankara Bhagavad-pada in the shloka? That is the problem here. Tadhapi. Now Madhusudana Saraswati reconciles and says, Tanmate avayavi anangikarat. He finds the reason here that the Charvaka, the atheists, Tanmate, that means in the view of the atheists, avayavi anangikarat. That means a particular avayavi. Avayavi means a whole, a combination, a group. Anangikara is not accepted. That's why, since they do not accept a particular thing called avayavi, that means a whole, whereas avayava is the part. So when so many things are combined, it becomes an avayavi, and when they are taken separately, they become avayava. And here avayavi anangikarat, just because the Charvaka do not accept an avayavi, panchama tattva abhyupagama prasangena cha. First thing is that they don't accept any avayavi. Second thing, if for the sake of argument, if they accept the avayavi, then the problem is that they will have to accept the 5th reality. And according to them, Chatvari Bhutani, according to them only 4 elements are real. And if they are forced to accept the avayavi, then it will become the 5th one. And thus there is a problem. Prasangena cha sanyogadi sambandha anubhyupagamat. Another logical problem is there, that samyogadi sambandha anubhyupagamat, and they have not accepted even the relation called sanyoga, samavaya, etc. They said the combination of 4 elements is jiva, that's only, and no other relation is also accepted in their philosophy. And that's why, since there is no relation, how can there be the combination 1. Then samhantur abhavacha. And another problem is, if we consider the samhati or the combination, then samhantuhu abhavat. Then the 4 elements come together and they form a combination, and out of that the jiva is created. If they say so, now we question samhanta kaha. Actually, who is the person combining all these? What is the force combining all these? Why all the elements come together and form a particular combination to create the jiva? So there should be some samhanta. Samhanta, that means the joiner, the connector, the connecting force should be accepted there. And abhavacha, but unfortunately the athis, they do not accept a connecting force of all the 4 elements. Sanghataha nopapadyate, and for these reasons only a combination is not possible at all. Iti abhipretya pratyeka bhuta nirakaranena bhautika dehatmavado nirakritaha. And considering all these logical fallacies, Shankara Bhagavatpada considered each separately. 1. Na bhumihi. 2. Na toyam. 3. Na tejaha. 4. Na vayuhu. So this way he has taken them separately, considering the logical problems. Pratyeka bhuta nirakaranena, and by the way of cancelling or negating each element as self, bhautika dehatmavadaha nirakritaha. We should understand that the bhautika deha atmavadaha means the theory that the self is materialistic is also nirakritaha, discarded. It is proved unauthentic. So thus in the shloka we find the refutation of each element separately. We should understand that the basic theory of Charvaka or the athis, that the body is a creation of all the elements, it is also discarded. Now, yadyapi bhuta chatushtaya tattvavadinaha mate avarana abhavatvena abhimatasya sthirasya asataha akashasya deha anupadanatvam. Of course, in the philosophy of materialists, the Charvaka, bhuta chatushtaya tattvavadinaha, that means who accepts the reality of only 4 elements, that is earth, water, air and fire. Avarana abhavatvena, there is no other covering agent. Abhimatasya sthirasya asataha akashasya, and in his view there is no 5th element called akasha, because in Charvaka system akasha is not accepted. He says 4 elements are tangible and they are a matter of direct perception, and because of that they are existent. And since akasha is not a matter of our perception experience, so it is not there. That is their theory. And akashasya deha anupadanatvam, and because of this reason that they don't accept space or sky as a cause of this body, because akasha is asat, it is unreal, and an unreal thing cannot be cause of a real thing. That's why akasha cannot be taken as the cause of the body. Tadhapi, of course this is true, but Siddhante, in the Vedanta philosophy, tasya bhavatvam, akasha is a bhava padartha, that means it is an existing thing. That is only empirically stated. It is an existing thing, because Atmanah akasha sambhutaha akashad vayuhu vayoragnihi. The Taittiriya Upanishad also says that the akasha is produced from the Atman, that is the self. And regarding the true nature of this sky, whether it is the Brahman or the physical akasha, there is a discussion in the Brahma Sutra also, Atayeva Pranaha. So in that particular context he has discussed whether akasha is Brahman or not. Now the cause akasha is the Brahman and the effect akasha is not the Brahman. That's what they decided there, that the akasha kam Brahma. So this way the akasha is Brahman only. That is the final theory of the Upanishads. And here Siddhante tasya bhavatvam, that means in the Advaita philosophy the akasha is a real thing, existent thing. Deha upadanatva angikarat, and because in our system it is accepted a real thing, there is no problem in accepting the Akasha as a cause of body. That's why we can consider this Akasha as a cause of body, and we can discard that theory of Charvaka also. Tatra atmatva prasaktya tannirakritam. That's why if because the sky Akasha is a real thing, if somebody says that it also is a cause of the self, the self is a product of that Akasha, so atmatva prasaktya, there is every chance of understanding Akasha as a cause. Therefore tannirakritam, that is also discarded in this particular shloka. Na kham. So in the refutation of the Bhutatmavadi, we find that Bhumi, Toya, Teja, Vayu and Kham, the Akasha is also included. Now the justification is given here by Madhusudana Saraswati that it is only from the standpoint of the Vedanta. Athava, or else we can understand that na vayuhu ityantameva dehatmavadasya nirakaranam. We can understand this refutation that na bhumihi, na toyam, na tejaha, na vayuhu, only the first sentence, it refers to the view of Charvaka, and their refutation is clear there. And now na kham, and this particular word na kham, not even kha, and here kha should not be taken as Akasha, kha should be taken as shunya. And if it is interpreted in this way, then shunyavadasya khashabdasya shunyavachakatvat. Then if the word kha is taken in the sense of voidness, shunyatva, kha means shunya, if we take in that sense, then shunyavadasya nirakritatvam. Then we can understand that Shankara Bhagavatpada has refuted the view of Shunyavadi Bauddha also, because Madhusudana Saraswati had stated earlier that first the Charvaka, then Bauddha, then Jaina. And in Bauddha also two views he has mentioned. One is Kshanikavada, second is Shunyavada. And the Shunyavada, which is popularly known as Madhyamika, propounded by Nagarjunacharya, that says that everything is only Shunyam, Sarvam Shunyam, Shunyam. Of course, they have interpreted that Shunya differently, saying that it is beyond all the conditions like Asti, Nasti, Tadubhaya, Tadanubhaya, Vinirmuktam, Tattvam, etc. They explain. But still here, that Shunyavada of Madhyamika is referred to by the word Nakham. Thus, we should understand that Shankara Bhagavatpada refutes the view of Shunyavada by the word Nakham. And now, Na Indriyam, not even any sense organ. That means any single sense organ should not be understood as self. Pratyekam indriyanam atmatva nirasaha. And na indriyam, by this word we should understand that each sense organ is discarded as the self. That means it is not to be understood as the self. Na tesham samuhaha, not even the group of all the sense organs. That means if anybody says that I means the total of all the sense organs, the eyes, the ears, the tongue, the nose, the skin, so the sensations received from all these sense organs only is to be called as I. Na samuhaha. But Shankaracharya says not even the group of sense organs be understood as the self. Iti militanam bhutanam deha avayavi akarena parinitanam indriyanam cha militanam nirasaha. That's why we cannot say that all the sense organs coming together to form a particular body is to be called the self. This view is unauthentic. It has no authority at all. Therefore, they should be discarded. Purvam Sanghatam anabhyupagamya pratyekam bhutani nirakritani. Here we understand that earlier, not accepting a combination, separately the sense organs, the elements are discarded as the self. That means they are not to be understood as the self. Adhunatu, now accepting a particular combination, now this combination is also not possible. That's what Shankara Bhagavatpada says. Sanghatam abhyupagamyapi. even by considering the combination for argument's sake, nirakritani, that means the panchabhutani, the indriyani, everything is negated as the self. Then bhuta nirakaranena, naturally by the refutation of each element as the self, bhautikayoho prana manasoho nirasaha. It should not be thought that Shankara Bhagavad-pada has not referred to these two, that means prana and manas, because in the shloka we find that na bhumir, na toyam, na tejo, na vayuh, na kham nendriyam, na tesham samuhaha. That means he has taken only the elements, the shunya and the indriya, only this much. What about the vital breath, the prana? What about the mind, the psyche? So what about discarding all these? Shankara Bhagavad-pada has not referred to these. Then there can be some lacuna in this. Thus some may doubt. And removing this doubt, Madhusudana Saraswati explains that since Bhagavad-pada has taken the elements, there is no need of taking prana and manas separately, because prana and manas are only bhautika, or only the material. Atayeva pranaha, even this Brahma Sutra also explained to us. Thus, here the bhautika prana is referred, and bhautika prana means the air which is physical, it enters into the body and gets out, and this bhautika prana is also not the self. And even manas, that means various sensations, the mind, it is also not to be understood as the self. Then what about vijnana? Because shunyavada of the Buddha is refuted. But what about the kshanikavada? It is not referred and refuted here. And now the commentator explains that mano nirakaranena cha manovrittehe kshanika vijnanasya dehatiriktasya kartrutva bhoktrutva visishtasya cha nirasaha. That means by the refutation of manas, mind, that means by stating that mind is also not the self, you understand that the kshanika vijnana is also refuted. That means we should understand that the kshanika vijnana, the momentary consciousness or awareness, is also not the self. That means the consciousness is not momentary as supposed by the Buddhists. How? He says manovrittehe, because the kshanika vijnana or the temporary momentary consciousness or sensation is only manovritti, is only a function of mind. So when mind is negated, its function is also negated. Mind is negated, then its function, that is the momentary consciousness, it is also negated as self. Dehatiriktasya, though they call the kshanika vijnana as different from the deha, that cannot be accepted as the self according to the Vedanta philosophy, because dehatirikta kartrutva bhoktrutva visishta. That means according to the opponent, that particular consciousness, momentary consciousness, is separate from the body, and it is visishta, it is qualified by kartrutva, bhoktrutva. That means it is regarded as agent, it is regarded as the enjoyer of the result of the deeds done. So that particular consciousness is only a function of this mind, and therefore it cannot be taken as the self. Siddhante. Now coming to our Vedanta philosophy, jnana, ichha, sukhadinam, antahkarana ashrayatva abhyupagamat. And we understand that knowledge, ichha, the desire, sukha, that means the pleasure, adi, etc. That means ichha, dvesha, sukha, dukkha, jnana, all these are antahkarana ashraya. That means at the empirical level, all these reside in the antahkarana. That means the inner organ. What is that? Antahkarana, that is actually one, which functions in various ways. But according to its function only, it is given a particular name. It is variously called as ahankara, buddhi, mana, chitta. So that's why in Vedanta Paribhasha also we come across that antahkaranasya ekatvepi tad vrittibhedat ahankaradi vyapadeshaha. So though it is one, Because of its various functioning only, we give various names to that particular inner organ called antahkarana. And now he says this antahkarana is the base of all empirical knowledge, the sukha, pleasure, ichha, desire, volition. So all these reside in antahkarana only, and when we get back to the consciousness, we don't find any of these. And now kama sankalpadini prakritya etat sarvam mana eva kama sankalpaha vichikitsa adhihi dhrutihi adhrutihi sarvam mana eva. Brihadaranyaka Upanishad also makes it clear that all these feelings that arise in ourselves, the kamaha, sankalpaha, vichikitsa, doubt, desire, a wish, so all these feelings are not to be taken separately. These are all various functions of one organ called manaha, mind. So that mind is the base of all the sensations, all the feelings. In that all these reside. When mind is discarded, automatically its results, all the other things are also to be understood as being discarded. So that's what Madhusudana Saraswati explains here, that we should not think that Shankara Bhagavad-pada has not mentioned the prana and mana separately. That should be understood from the given words only. And thus the text explains to us that mana is discarded, to be understood as discarded, and its effect, that is the kshanika vijnana, is also to be understood as being discarded by these words. Etena, and by this elaboration, deham arabhya kevala bhoktru paryantanam tattad vadi abhyupagatanam anatvatvam pratijnatam bhavati. And now in logical arguments we find that pratijna, that means there should be one proposition. There the whatever is intended to be propounded, that should be the pratijna vakya, and the thing by which it is to be established, that is the hetu vakya, then udaharana, then upanaya, nigamana. Of course, in the Vedanta philosophy, they accept only three members of logic, syllogism. They are only pratijna, hetu, udaharana, or udaharana, upanaya, nigamana. Either way it is accepted, no problem at all. Here, if we accept the first pattern, pratijna, that means the proposition should be there. Parvato vanhiman. Similarly, something should be stated as the pratijna. And now Madhusudana Saraswati explains that deham arabhya, deham atma na. This can be one pratijna vakya. 2. Indriyani atma na. Bhutani atma na. Karta atma na. Bhokta atma na. So this way we can take that starting from the dehatmavada to kevala bhoktru paryanta, all tattadvadi abhyupagatanam, all the views of the opponents are anatmatvam. They are not to be taken as the self, because there is absolute difference between these two. You cannot understand absolute identity between two, that is light and darkness, fire and water. There cannot be absolute identity, and here we cannot find any kind of identity between the elements and the self. And that's why whatever is anatma, that is shown here very clearly and discarded. That since it is anatma, you cannot say that it is the self. Pratijnatam bhavati. Okay, when you say that there is pratijna vakya, the proposition should be followed by the hetu vakya. The reason should be given. That means when somebody tries to establish something, propound something, there should be definitely one hetu vakya. When we say parvato vanhiman, then there should be dhumat, that vakya should follow, and on the basis of this vakya only something can be established, and that particular hetu is also strengthened by the vyapti vakya, which is found in the udaharana vakya. And now Shankara Bhagavad-pada gives the hetu vakya here with the word anaikantikatvat. This is the hetu vakya. That means na bhumihi, na toyam, na tejaha, na vayuhu, na kham, na indriyam, na tesham samuha. So each one can be taken as separate pratijna vakya, and anaikantikatvat is the single reason provided here for each Pratigna Vakya. So we can construe the sentence or the Nyaya Prayoga or the syllogism here like Bhumihi Atma na Anaikantikatvat, Toyam Atma na Anaikantikatvat, Tejaha Atma na Anaikantikatvat, Vayuhu Atma na Anaikantikatvat, Kham Atma na Anaikantikatvat, Indriyam Atma na Anaikantikatvat, Indriya Samuha Atma na Anaikantikatvat. So this way Anaikantikatvat can be connected with each Pratigna Vakya, because Anaikantikatvat, which is in the fifth case, ablative case, is the Hetu Vakya. And thus the first two sentences now are connected with the first word of the third sentence, and here we understand the Nyaya Prayoga, and in the next class we proceed with the explanation or elaboration of Madhusudana Saraswati, how he explains the idea, the purport of the shloka of Shankara Bhagavad Pada. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.